Ukrainian drones have struck a Kaliber missile carrier in Novorossiysk. And for the second time since spring began, one of the enemy's largest oil terminals on the Black Sea. We will share new details of this attack. Ukraine is close to creating 2 supersonic ballistic missiles, and one of them could put Moscow within its strike range. Waiting for Armageddon? Trump did not support a 45-day ceasefire plan for Iran that was developed by international mediators. And is a false flag operation possible? Serbian military intelligence has refuted the insinuations of Hungarian Prime Minister Orban. Ukraine did not organize the sabotage on the gas pipeline in Vojvodina. All of this and more we'll discuss in detail right now. And please don't forget to like this episode, and let's get started. A series of attacks on Russia's key oil terminals in the Baltic Sea has led to significant financial losses. According to the Financial Times, Russian energy exporters are losing about $1 billion every week. And that is only lost export revenue. And now it's time once again to take the hits. Retribution on the Black Sea. Ukrainian drones launched a massive attack on the city of Novorossiysk in the Krasnodar region. According to videos posted on social media and analyzed by Astra, the Sheskari's oil terminal was hit. It's one of the largest oil and petroleum product transshipment complexes in southern Russia, holding strategic importance as it plays a key role in the operation of the Novorossiysk seaport and the entire export infrastructure of the country's south. The General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine previously stated that the oil terminal is used to supply Russian military groups conducting combat operations in Ukraine. Before this, drones attacked the terminal on March 2nd, which caused a fire on its grounds. It was also attacked in November 2025. At that time, an oil depot and the Chernomor Transneft pier were damaged. Russia is planning a new offensive against Ukraine and is already preparing another wave of mobilization for the Russian occupiers. But are the Kremlin's ambitions too high, and will Russia face a repeat of the failed operation? Kyiv in 3 days. See more in our report.
Russia is preparing for a new offensive in Ukraine. According to Bloomberg, the Kremlin is considering a scenario of a prolonged war for another 1 to 2 years.
The Russian authorities essentially are simply not ready today to accept or even acknowledge the undeniable fact that the war in Ukraine is in fact lost. Even those ephemeral and ever-shifting goals of the so-called special military operation, which was set by the Putin regime, have not even been fulfilled by 50%, not even halfway. In reality, the objectives remain largely unachieved, and the situation continues to reflect that undeniable truth.
Despite this, the US states that a chance for dialogue remains, but the positions of the parties stay far apart. At the same time, peace talks have effectively reached a stalemate as Russia demands concessions and Ukraine refuses to accept them. But the main question is not Russia's intentions, but its capabilities. Here, the picture for Russia is much less optimistic. Ukrainian forces have built a so-called wall of drones, which destroys most assault groups before they even reach the front lines.
Basically, as of today, Russia is unable to achieve on the battlefield in Ukraine any significant results in matters of, for example, operational, tactical, or even strategic importance. Therefore, of course, it can now be stated that in the Russian military political leadership, there is a serious detachment from reality and immersion in some completely separate parallel reality that does not correspond to the truth.
The pace of the offensive is minimal. In some places, Russian troops advanced only 15 meters per day. This is an anti-record for more than a century of modern world wars, not to mention the same anti-record since the start of the full-scale invasion. Analysts are also recording a general slowdown. In March, the Russian army captured only 23 square kilometers, which is many times less than at the beginning of the year.
January, 319 square kilometers. February, 123 square kilometers. March, 23 square kilometers.
Among the reasons are the counter-offensive actions of the AFU and Russia's own internal problems. For example, communication disruptions and restricted access to key technologies. Moreover, in some areas, the Russians are not advancing, but retreating. In particular, the Ukrainian military is gradually pushing them out of the Kupiansk direction.
Russia wants to continue the war, and that is the truth. They still hope that their spring-summer offensive campaign of 26 will yield certain results that could, for example, become a turning point for them. But that's unlikely since the starting phase itself, which began in the second half of March, has completely failed. We are now seeing a very high rate of losses for Russian troops on the battlefield, and at the same time, one of the lowest rates of capturing Ukrainian territory.
However, rising oil prices could temporarily strengthen the Russian budget and provide resources to continue the war. In addition, the Kremlin is preparing society for a new wave of mobilization.
For the first time since 2023, Ukraine has moved to systematic counter-attacking actions, not counter-offensive, but specifically counter-attacking limited of a tactical nature. And since January 27th, they have been successful. More than 480 square kilometers of Ukrainian territory have been liberated, which exceeds the amount of Ukrainian territory captured by Russian troops during the same period.
Despite preparations for an offensive, Russia is facing reality, slow progress, losses, and Ukraine's effective defense. And it is this reality that could become the main constraint on the Kremlin's plans.
The unmanned systems forces struck the occupiers' military frigate, Admiral Grigorovich, in the port of Novorossiysk and the Sivash drilling rig. This was stated by the commander of the unmanned systems forces, Robert Madyar Brody. Quote, SBS birds on the night of April 6th struck the frigate. Admiral Makarov in the port of Novorossiysk and delivered some holy fire to the drilling rig. Sivash, he said, and he noted that the operation was carried out by the military of the 1st OC of the Unmanned Systems Forces, planned and coordinated by the SBU. Madyar added that the extent of the damage is being determined by intelligence. Admiral Makarov is the first military frigate of the Burevestnik project of the Russian Navy. It is a carrier of Kaliber cruise missiles and the Shtil-1 air defense system. Air defense missile launches were carried out directly from the frigate's deck during the approach to the target, which did not prevent a strike on it. The strike on the floating drilling rig Sivash was carried out by the military, the 413th OP raid, together with the deep strike forces of the Navy Sivash. This is a jack-up drilling rig capable of drilling oil wells up to 6 meters deep. The superiority of Shahids in the sky over Ukraine has come to an end. The AFU has mastered an effective technique for their neutralization. What exactly we are talking about is next in our report.
Shahids are forbidden to fly. Ukraine is solidifying the defense of its sky against Russian strike drones. In March, the occupiers launched a record number of drones, but the AFU also set a record.
Monthly infographics on the Shahed 136, Jiran 2 and Gerbera UAVs. March results. Record. Total 6,462 units. 5,833 shot down, or 90%. 629 reached the target, or 10%. Average number of launches per day, 208 units, plus 15%.
The secret of the success of the defense forces of Ukraine, interceptor drones. According to Commander-in-Chief Oleksandr Syrsky, in the spring, the effectiveness of combat sorties of unmanned interceptors increased by almost 55%.
Since the beginning of spring, our interceptor UAVs have already destroyed more than 2,300 enemy air targets. The enemy does not stop attacking. On the contrary, it increases production, modernizes drones, and improves their use.
After the appointment of Mikhailo Fedorov to the post of Minister of Defense, Kyiv has significantly increased in the aspect of development and implementation of unmanned systems. To date, the Ukrainian military-industrial complex produces dozens of various interceptors. Some, such as Octopus or UEB-1, work on the basis of artificial intelligence. Others, such as Sting, can be controlled by an operator at a distance of hundreds of kilometers.
An absolute world record. A pilot shot down a Shahed using a Sting interceptor at a distance of 500 kilometers using Hornet vision control technology. Roman Hulk from the Bulava unit shot down 2 Shaheds that were 500 kilometers away from him.
Well, and not by interceptors alone. Counteraction to Russian weapons of terror is carried out comprehensively. Anti-aircraft missile systems, helicopters armed with machine guns and ground-based mobile fire groups have not lost their relevance. In addition, businesses and private companies have joined the defense of the Ukrainian sky, which the government has allowed to create their own air defense units.
An experimental project launched by the government to involve the private sector in the air defense system is already being implemented and is yielding its first results. One of the companies participating in the project has already prepared its own air defense group. As of today, several enemy drones have already been shot down in the Kharkiv region, specifically Shahed and Zala.
The armed forces of Ukraine also do not forget about the best defense tactic, offense. In a week, the unmanned systems forces carried out at least 3 successful strikes on Shahed launch sites.
Ukraine will receive high-tech Trident air defense systems from Sweden. They will help in the fight against Shaheds and other aerial threats. This was reported by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. Sweden will allocate 400 million euros for the purchase of the latest systems, almost a third of the amount of the new military aid package of 1.2 billion, which was announced in February. Trident is a mobile medium-range air defense system. It was first presented in 2024. It works in any weather conditions day and night. One of its advantages is the relatively low cost per shot. The new unit is capable of simultaneously countering many threats, including strike and reconnaissance drones, aircraft, helicopters, and cruise missiles. The Trident gun uses ammunition with programmable detonation. It explodes directly in front of the target, creating a cloud of fragments, and this significantly increases the effectiveness of the fight against aerial drones and cruise missiles. The latest system can be installed on tracked armored all-terrain vehicles or trucks. It is equipped with electric drives, making it easy to integrate with various platforms, unlike systems with hydraulic drives. Turkey is already openly supporting Ukraine, weakening Russia. Erdogan expressed his desire and readiness to host a platform for peace negotiations between Kyiv and Moscow. And this is for a reason. About the new stab in Putin's back. Next.
Zelensky is in Turkey again. However, this time the discussion wasn't just about peace negotiations. Now Ukraine is a full-fledged ally and a security partner. On his Facebook, the Ukrainian leader stated that relevant decisions at the state level have already been made.
In 2022, everyone was talking about the Turkish Bayraktar, which was even building a plant in Ukraine, and we were sort of taking their drone technologies. Now the Turks will be taking ours. 4 years have passed. In this sense, a lot has changed.
Here, analysts say it's important not just to sell your products, but also to sign long-term contracts. And in the matter with Turkey, it's necessary to build interaction wisely so that the partnership doesn't turn into competition.
Both Ukraine and Turkey produce drones. This means that we need to coordinate so that these drone deliveries to the Middle East region don't negatively affect anything and that everything goes as smoothly as possible. The partner, and I'm speaking from the Ukrainian side as well. But Ukraine has extensive experience in conducting combat operations. That's a bit different because just producing a drone isn't always enough to defend against drones.
At the same time, perhaps the main thing Ukraine can offer is not just the drones themselves, but the experience of fighting drones and missiles using cheaper methods than what NATO is used to. It's a so-called turnkey air defense model, which Ankara, having already fended off Iranian missiles 3 times, is extremely interested in today.
This includes tactics, electronic warfare systems, detection, and the anti-aircraft system, meaning how to effectively shoot them down, and overall the organization of modern combat, how to carefully behave in a kill zone, how to fight an army armed with traditional weapons using small forces and fairly inexpensive equipment, a well-trained army which includes helicopters, tanks, and other military vehicles, all of which are actually neutralized quite effectively by drones that are orders of magnitude cheaper.
The meeting between the presidents also touched upon negotiations. Zelensky and Erdogan confirmed that Istanbul could become a new venue for a trilateral meeting in the Ukraine, US, Russia format.
Negotiations in Turkey took place in 2022, as we recall, and in 2025 they began in the summer, specifically in Turkey. Moreover, Turkey, unlike the United Arab Emirates, took a more active part. The foreign minister there was effectively the moderator of the negotiations.
It's worth noting that earlier, the secretary of the NSDC, Rustem Umerov, traveled to Turkey for a visit. There, he held a meeting with the Turkish defense minister, Yaşar Güler. They discussed developments in humanitarian and defense cooperation between Kyiv and Ankara. However, analysts believe they talked about more than just that.
I am deeply convinced that there are so-called facade topics, right, that he discusses in Turkey. At his own level, at the level of the foreign minister, and at the level of the defense minister. This includes Turkey as a negotiation platform, and it also includes the exchange of prisoners. But I am deeply convinced that there are also topics that do not make it into official media reports.
Among such, for example, experts name the role of Ukraine as a whole in the Middle East. After all, once the war in Iran ends, many things will change. Specifically in terms of trade, defense, maritime transport, and more. This is where Kyiv gets a chance to become a full-fledged player in the region. And it is better to discuss this in advance.
The president's visit to Turkey is not just about, talks about peace mediation, military cooperation, or economic relations. It was during this visit, I am sure, the Iranian war and the changing balance of power in the Near and Middle East were discussed. Ukraine is a key player on the Asian map. This is a moment that in principle allows us to finally talk not just about international subjectivity, but about a certain soft power that Ukraine possesses.
In exchange, even today, Ukraine receives a reliable partnership with Turkey, which has once again confirmed that it does not dispute our territorial integrity. And given recent meetings, it will clearly act more actively as a peacemaker.
The Ukrainian company Firepoint, manufacturer of the Flamingo cruise missile, is in the final stages of developing two supersonic ballistic missiles, the FP-7 and FP-9. Co-founder and chief designer of Firepoint, Dennis Stillerman, stated that the smaller missile, the FP-7, will have a range of about 300 kilometers and could be used for military purposes for the first time in the near future. He described it as an analog to the American short-range ballistic system ATACMS. Firepoint is also in talks with European companies to launch a new air defense system, which is intended to be a cheaper alternative to the Patriot. Dennis Stillerman said that the company aims to reduce the cost of intercepting a ballistic missile to less than $1 million. If we manage to reduce this amount to less than $1 million, it will be a breakthrough solution for air defense, he emphasized. We plan to intercept the first ballistic missile at the end of 2027, Stillerman noted. Currently, Ukraine and many other Western allies rely heavily on American systems, Patriot systems for intercepting ballistic missiles. However, these systems are becoming harder to obtain, particularly due to active deployment in the Persian Gulf to protect against Iranian attacks. United States President Donald Trump did not support a 45-day ceasefire plan for Iran developed by international mediators. This is according to CNN. It is reported that the draft agreement sent to Washington and Tehran is seen as a final attempt to stop full-scale U.S. strikes on Iran's power grid and critical infrastructure. Trump previously threatened massive attacks if Iran does not unblock the Strait of Hormuz. The White House confirmed receipt of the document but emphasized that President Trump did not approve it. However, Iran also rejected the proposed truce with the U.S. and demanded clear guarantees that hostilities would not resume in the future. Ukraine has offered assistance in unblocking the strategically vital Strait of Hormuz, which is closed due to the escalating conflict between Iran, the U.S., and Israel. Volodymyr Zelensky stated our country's readiness to use its experience in securing maritime corridors to stabilize energy supplies, on which the global economy depends. Additionally, Ukraine has established ties with the Libyan government in Tripoli and created an outpost that now threatens Russian ships passing through the Mediterranean to the Red Sea and Suez Canal. All the details are coming up in the report.
Iran has closed the Strait of Hormuz, causing significant logistical problems for global trade. According to the International Maritime Organization, about 2,000 vessels are currently blocked in the Persian Gulf.
Overall, it can be noted that this is probably one of the world's most significant problems right now. At the same time, the United States has proven unable to independently restore the passage of ships through this strategically vital region. And this affects the entire global economy, so it seems that everyone is now looking for alternative ways to ensure free shipping through this very strait.
At the same time, it's reported that certain ships linked to Iran, China, India, and Pakistan are still able to pass through this strategic waterway.
It is known, for example, that Japan is negotiating with Iran, and apparently one Japanese tanker has already passed through the Strait of Hormuz safely. Consequently, there's a high probability that everyone will now rush to conduct their own separate negotiations with Iran regarding passage through the Strait of Hormuz. Therefore, the United States doesn't have much time to demonstrate the effectiveness of its actions.
Ukraine has the expertise in maritime routes, their protection, and restoring traffic. This was stated by President Volodymyr Zelensky.
If partners are ready to act, we will consider how to strengthen them, how to add our experience, knowledge, and technological potential. Now it's impossible to imagine real security without Ukraine. I thank everyone who understands this.
A day earlier, during a virtual meeting of representatives from 40 countries on ensuring freedom of navigation in the Strait of Hormuz, Ukrainian Foreign Minister Andriy Sybiha emphasized that there is a direct link between the situation in the Middle East and Russian aggression against Ukraine. According to the minister regarding the Strait of Hormuz, Iran pursues the same goals as Russia in the Black Sea, to destabilize world markets and blackmail others.
The regimes in Moscow and Tehran are inseparable and pose an equal threat to Ukraine, Europe, the United States, and Middle Eastern countries. Terrorist regimes are sharing their experiences. What Iran is doing today in the Strait of Hormuz, Russia did yesterday in the Black Sea. The problem is that Iran has studied Russia's mistakes and drawn conclusions from them. Moscow tried to weaponize food in the Black Sea when it attacked grain ships. And Iran is currently trying to weaponize oil in the Strait of Hormuz. There are no longer any isolated regional conflicts. Ukraine's combat experience is valuable for the Middle East. Global security is interconnected.
According to military expert Alexander Musyenko, Ukraine, for its part, indeed has reasons to punish Iran.
The Iranians shot down a Ukrainian plane just before the full-scale Russian invasion. People died, the crew. The Iranians didn't admit those were two of their missiles. Though the evidence is irrefutable that it was Iran, they didn't allow Ukrainian experts in. Then they started supplying Shaheds that flew and killed Ukrainians, destroyed our infrastructure, property, and homes.
Ukraine has a direct interest in the stability of world markets and in ensuring that the Russian Federation cannot use instability in the Middle East to fund its aggression.
The idea that our drones could appear in Hormuz and then go from the Strait of Hormuz into the Gulf of Oman and even the Indian Ocean, and there effectively destroy the Russian shadow fleet, it's taking on a new shape. It can be realized. The next target could be the shadow fleet. It needs to be dealt with.
Political scientist Petro Oleschuk is certain Ukrainian help in unblocking the strait is truly necessary.
And probably if the United States had taken the offers of help from Ukraine a bit more seriously, it probably would have helped both the United States and everyone. Ukraine is one of the few countries that in this situation offers help to the United States, even though it's not even an ally of the United States and doesn't have any alliance treaties with the United States. But it's obvious that in this regard, the Trump administration follows personal, some attitudes, Trump's emotions, who is very skeptical of Ukraine rather than the interests of the United States.
But that's not all. According to an investigation by the French publication RFI, Ukraine has established ties with the Libyan government in Tripoli and created an outpost that now threatens Russian ships passing through the Mediterranean to the Red Sea via the Suez Canal. Two Libyan sources reported that the presence of military personnel from Ukraine is coordinated with the government led by Abdul Hamid Dbeibeh.
Over 200 Ukrainian officers and experts are stationed in Libya with the government's consent of Dbeibeh. They are operating at 3 main sites, including the airbase in Misrata.
The Ukrainian contingent is spread across 3 facilities. The first is at the Misrata airbase, the second is in the Melita area, 50 kilometers from the capital. The third is near the Tripoli airport.
A fully equipped drone launch base has been established in the Melita area. All the work was carried out in the fall of 2025.
According to sources, Ukraine has already twice attacked Russian ships in the Mediterranean. On March 4th, the gas carrier Arctic Metagas was attacked. The vessel was hit by a Magura V-5 naval drone, which was launched from the Melita area. And in December 25, a Russian tanker was attacked by a sea drone from Misrata, the Quandil, 250 kilometers off the coast of Libya. According to the publication, representatives of Wagner PMC and the GRU were on board. As a result of the strike, 2 people were killed and 7 were injured. Among those killed was Russian General Andrei Averyanov, a high-ranking Russian intelligence officer. So you there in Russia, don't get too comfortable. Next is the most interesting part.
Serbia's military intelligence director, Jura Jovanic, refuted Hungarian Premier Orban's words. Ukraine did not organize the sabotage on the gas pipeline between the 2 countries. It is not true that Ukrainians tried to organize this conspiracy, he said. Earlier, Hungarian Premier Orban, after an emergency defense council meeting, claimed a sabotage operation in Vojvodina and hinted at Ukrainian involvement, which he said had allegedly worked for years to cut Europe off from Russian energy. Orban's main election rival, Peter Magyar, called the situation a potential false flag operation and suggested that Serbian and Russian perpetrators were behind it. In his view, Orban could have used this incident due to the falling ratings of the Fidesz party. Next, we'll discuss Orban's chances of keeping the Prime Minister's seat after the elections, which, by the way, are this Sunday. And don't forget to like this episode and subscribe to the Ukraine Today YouTube channel. The Hungarian elections are in the spotlight of the global community. During his rule, the odious Premier Viktor Orban has managed to get into so many scandals that the world community, including Ukrainians, await his resignation like manna from heaven.
It turns out that tiny Hungary, with its 10 million inhabitants, exerts a completely disproportionate influence on the entire course of world politics.
However, Orban does not intend to give up so easily. The Hungarian premier is clinging to power with all his might, using the dirtiest and most unprincipled methods of struggle. And it's worth noting that even some exemplary democratic states are helping him in this.
This whole situation is, to put it mildly, paradoxical, but perhaps it would be more accurate to say it's absurd. Because after all, it's not just Russia that's involved in all of this, right? We all remember that Marco Rubio has already been to Budapest and has already supported Orban. We know that Donald Trump has repeatedly declared his full and unconditional support for Viktor Orban in the upcoming elections. And now we hear, again from American sources, that J.D. Vance is going to Budapest in April, right before the elections. Well, in any normal situation, this would probably be called interference in the internal affairs of another state.
However, the United States is far from the only one playing along with Orban and doing everything to keep him in power. In Hungary, the Budapest Prime Minister's main friend is the Russian dictator Putin. And that's because since the beginning of 2022, Hungary has been openly pursuing a pro-Russian policy so aggressively that today this EU country can be considered a Russian satellite on the international stage. Since the start of the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Orban has personally met with Putin in Moscow twice, and his foreign minister has visited the Russian capital 16 times during the same period. In return, the man in the bunker sends his oil and gas to Hungary, as well as top political consultants to run the election campaign for Viktor Orban's party.
A country that, in particular, probably for at least the last 20 years, hasn't held a single fair, open or normal election, is going to save the election campaign of a party that, ever since the year 2010, has probably managed to win about half a dozen different elections at various governmental levels. And in each case, they won by a huge margin, each time gaining more votes than the entire opposition combined. And yet won, unlike in Turkey or Russia, without resorting to election manipulation,